for K-12 in design thinking, the most important thing, I think, is to get the students to kind of be confident in their creative ability, to know that they have a method, that we've taught them a method, we call that method design thinking, that they can fall back on. So whenever a teacher gives them a problem, I know what to do. I'll use my design thinking. I'll go and understand people. I'll build prototypes. I'll go in an iterative way. That confidence that you have a way of being creative. You don't have to wait for an idea to come out of the sky. You actually have a kind of a confidence because you know that you have a system, a methodology. You know, it's like you took a lot of piano lessons, so you're not afraid to play the piano. It's the same. You have a lot of feeling that you know what to do. Yeah, I think design thinking's so popular in the United States because it allows students to do things that are real. You know, I mean, if you're a student and you have this class and they teach you, let's say, math, and they say, here's math, and what they're saying is, here's math, we believe us, trust us that it might be useful in the future. You know, it's like, it's not tied to anything that they can feel. And design thinking, you know, like if I give you a project to design a solar car, and then I teach you math about the solar car, you say, oh, math's really important. I use the math to design the solar car, as opposed to when you teach math in the way where you teach it and it's a problem set in the back of the book, and then you turn it in and you give it to the teacher and they say, yes, no, you know, 75%. I mean, it doesn't mean anything, right? So we believe strongly in this, you know, project-based learning and design as a way to motivate the students to want to learn math and science and so forth, yes. I have lots of Chinese students that are very smart and very hardworking, right? And many people want me to say, oh, the Chinese students are not as creative as other students. It's not true. I mean, they're wildly creative. What they have is blocks. It doesn't matter whether from China or from Africa or India or France. I mean, the same problem that students have, which is they are creative people. Everybody's creative people. Look at kindergartners, look at first graders, wildly creative. What happens is they have some blocks in the way. There's some blocks in the way of that. And so our job as educators is to remove the blocks and let that creativity shine through. So introducing it to any culture, I mean, introducing it to China's, I know if that's any harder than introducing it to a high school in, you know, in Southern California that doesn't use design thinking. It's a new thing. Everybody has all the habits. They have all these habits that they trust, and you're asking them to throw that way away and use this new way of doing. So it's hard no matter who it is. So the only way, so we've written a book, we have workshops. The only way I'm sure that I can make them get excited about it is to have them, you know, go through a workshop, spend 3 or 4 days and see the power of it and see how excited the students are. And so that's not very good because there's so many teachers to get to. I don't know how, I'm very concerned about how you scale this up. And so the only thing I know to do is to to have people like Youth MBA, like have them do a very, very good job of it and then hope other people will copy. You know, it's a little bit in the, maybe it's not a good example because it's in the US, but US Postal Service was really terrible, you know, delivering the mail. And then Federal Express came, and then UPS came, and now the post office is very good because of the competition of UPS and Federal Express. So I'm thinking that places like Youth MBA and other places do a very good job, and then other places will copy. That's the only way. So we've seen it, right? So even any mother who knows that there's a better place for her child to go. If this school looks like a jail and this school looks like a very exciting place, the mother will try to make sure her child goes to this place. So we use that faith that the parents will do the right thing, and all we have to do is build a really good example, you know, of this, and then the students will move to it. They'll vote with their feet. They'll go to the new place. Yeah, if I'm going to go back to 10 years old, I'm going to be more concerned about the social emotional part of school. So there's math and science and English and Chinese and history and you know, biology and stuff. I think we're okay in that. What we're not okay with is the social emotional stuff, like the motivational, that the kids are excited, you know, and so I'd take all kinds of, you know, first I would just take all kinds of training around how to feel good about yourself, how, you know, all that. It seemed like it was so unimportant. And today I think it's so important, you know, that as a part of, you know, that students build empathy for things, that they know how to be calm. They don't think, they don't do everything has to be perfect. You know, that they learn to work hard, but they learn to play hard. I mean, it's that part that we're missing, not the academic part. It's the social emotional part that we're missing. My greatest feeling when I teach is when someone who doesn't think they're creative, they think, no, I'm a computer scientist. No, I'm a math, I'm science, but I'm not creative. And then we take them through and we do some projects, and they're successful, and they do some projects. And the greatest moment is when they realize that they're creative and their eyes sparkle, or they cry and they say, I feel like I'm a creative person. It's amazing. I see it happen all the time. It's fantastic. It happens in college. It happens in K through 12. It's really, as an educator, it's a special moment when somebody starts to think of themselves as creative, and they can do what they want to do. Before that, they feel like they're doing something they have to do. But once they think of themselves as creative, then they say, oh, I can do what I want to do now. It's fantastic. It's a great feeling.
Now, CBS This Morning co-host Charlie Rose on assignment for 60 Minutes.
Tonight, we're going to introduce you to one of the most innovative thinkers of our time. He's a man who has had an enormous impact on our everyday lives. David Kelley is the founder of the Silicon Valley global design firm IDEO. His company has created thousands of breakthrough inventions, including the first computer mouse from Apple, the stand-up toothpaste tube, a better Pringle for Procter & Gamble. IDEO may be the most influential product design company in the world. He was a longtime friend and colleague of Steve Jobs, and he is a pioneer in something known as design thinking, an innovative approach that incorporates human behavior into design.
The big thing about design thinking is it allows people to build on the ideas of others. Instead of just having this one thread, you think about it, I come up with an idea, and then somebody from somewhere else says, oh, that makes me think we should do this, and then we could do that, and then you get to a place that you just can't get to in one mind.
If you follow David Kelley around IDEO, you can see how he has infused that thinking into the legendary Palo Alto firm he founded more than 20 years ago. Breakthrough ideas happen every day here. The key to unlocking creativity at IDEO may be their unorthodox approach to problem solving. They throw a bunch of people with different backgrounds together in a room.
So you're in the business end?
Yep. My background's in software engineering.
Journalism.
Aerospace engineer.
Doctors, opera singers, and anthropologists, for example, and get them to brainstorm.
You got to have a certain culture. You got to have collaboration. You got to have diversity. You got to have an anthropologist and a business person and an engineer and a computer scientist, all of those kinds of...
You got it. That's the hard part, is the cultural thing of having a diverse group of people and having them be good at building on each other's ideas.
They encourage wild ideas and visualize solutions by making actual prototypes. But the main tenet is empathy for the consumer, figuring out what humans really want by watching them.
If you want to improve a piece of software, all you have to do is watch people using it and see when they grimace, and then correlate that to where they are in the software, and you can fix that, right? And so the thing is to really build empathy, try to understand people through observing them.
In other words, their experience will communicate what you need to focus on.
Yep, exactly.
It is a concept that had its genesis in 1978 when Kelley and some Stanford pals took the notion of mixing human behavior and design and started the company that would eventually become IDEO. One of their first clients was the owner of a fast-growing personal computer manufacturer by the name of Steve Jobs.
He made IDEO because he was such a good client. We did our best work for him.
we became friends, and he'd call me at 3 o'clock in the morning.
At 3 a.m.?
Yeah, we were both bachelors, so he knew he could call me, right? So he'd call me at 3 o'clock, and he'd just, like, with no preamble, hey, it's Steve. First, I knew if it was 3 o'clock in the morning, it was him. And there's no preamble, and he'd just start. He said, you know those screws that we're using to hold the two thing on the inside? I mean, he was deep into every aspect of things.
Kelly's company helped design dozens of products for Apple, including Apple III and Lisa, and the very first Apple mouse, a descendant of which is still in use today.
He said to us, you know, for $17, he gave us that number, $17, I want you to make a mouse that we're going to use in all of our computers. So what happened here was we're trying to figure out how to make, so you move your hand and how you make the thing move on screen. So at first we thought, we got to make it really accurate. You know, like when we move the mouse an inch, it's got to move exactly an inch on the screen. And then after we prototyped it, we realized it doesn't matter at all. Your brain's in the loop. The whole thing was make it intuitive for the human.
But even after they solved that monumental problem, Jobs still wasn't satisfied.
So he didn't like the way the ball sounded on the table, so we had to rubber coat the ball. Well, rubber coating the ball was a huge technical problem because you can't have any seams, you got to get it just right. And so, you know, it'd just be one thing like that.
Suppose Steve had said to you, I'd like to have a ball that's not steel but rubber coated, and you said, no, you can't do that, Steve. What would he say?
The expletives that I would have would probably are not good on camera, but it was basically, I thought you were good, you know, like I thought I hired you because you were smart, you know, like you're letting me down.
Since then, design thinking has led to thousands of breakthroughs, from redesigning Xylus kitchen tools so they're easier to use, to coming up with a heart defibrillator that talks to you during an emergency.
It talks to you and it shows you visually what to do.
And they came up with TiVo's thumbs up, thumbs down button.
It makes your TV smarter, right? Because you give it the thumbs up or thumbs down, and your TV learns what you like and what you don't like.
It's why Steelcase, a company that has been building furniture for 100 years, turned to IDEO to reinvent the classroom chair.
This is one of my favorite things. I want you to sit in this chair.
Oh, I love this.
So
really
this is for kids. So
well, I'm a kid, so there you
right,
go.
You're perfect. So when we looked at that old wooden thing with the dog egg leg kind of stuff,
right.
And if you just watch kids and see what they need, what do they need? Well, the main thing they need is a place to put their backpack. So you got a place to put your backpack. And then they need it to, they're fidgety. They want to move around, so you put it on wheels, right? And in getting in and out of it, you know, you need to just. So
it's not rocket science, it's what?
It's empathetic.
Empathetic.
It's empathetic to people. Like really, like try to really understand what they really value.
Now they're working with clients all over the globe. They're using the same intuitive human point of view to improve access to safe drinking water in India and Africa, redesigning school systems in Peru, and helping North Face expand their brand into China. Kelly has always been good at coming up with ingenious solutions to everyday problems. His first job was at Boeing. He was part of a team that designed the lights around the passenger windows, as well as a milestone in aviation history, the laboratory occupied sign. But he says the seeds of who he is today can be traced to his childhood in Barberton, Ohio, passenger tire capital of the world, where he learned the value of building with his hands.
In my family, if the washer broke, you didn't go order the part. You went down, tore the washer apart, and tried to make a new part to fix it, because that was part of the game that, you know, we're capable of fixing things.
And that was something that was part of you too. You were a tinkerer who wanted to take it apart and put it back together.
One of the best stories my mother tells, I took the family piano apart, but it wasn't that interesting to put it back together. So the piano sat there with this big harp kind of thing hanging out of it for most of my childhood.
Was in his 20s, working unhappily as an engineer, when he heard about Stanford University's product design program. What he learned there would transform his life as a design thinker.
And so what happened when you came to Stanford?
So I get to Stanford, and it was heaven. Stanford was the synthesis of kind of art and engineering, and it was wonderful.
It was shortly after that that Steve Jobs came into the picture. For over 30 years, they worked together and were close friends.
What's the biggest misconception about him?
I think the misconception is around that he was kind of like, you know, like malicious. He was like trying to be mean to people. He wasn't. He was just trying to get things done, right? And it was, you just had to learn how to react to that. He did some lovely things for me in my life.
Jobs introduced Kelly to his wife, Casey Branscombe, And Steve Jobs was also there for Kelly when the unthinkable happened. In 2007, Kelly was diagnosed with throat cancer and given a 40% chance of survival. Jobs, already suffering from his own deadly cancer, gave him some advice.
He came over and said, look, don't consider any alternative. Go straight to Western medicine. Don't try any herbs or anything.
Why do you think Steve said, don't look for alternative medicine, go straight to the hard stuff?
I think in his mind, he had made the mistake that he had tried to cure his pancreatic cancer in other ways other than, he just said, don't mess around. When we both had cancer at the same time was when I got really close to him. And I was at home, like sitting around in my skivvies, waiting for my next dose of something. And I think it was the day after the iPhone was announced. He had one for me, right?
An iPhone.
Your own iPhone delivered by Steve Jobs right after it comes out. It was a lovely feeling. So he decides to hook it up for me. So he gets on the phone to AT&T, and he's going to hook up my phone. And it's not going well. So
this is such good news for me.
Eventually, he pulls the "I'm Steve Jobs" card. He says to the guy, "I'm Steve Jobs." I'm sure the guy on the other end says, "I'm Napoleon." Like, get out of here. But anyway, so he never did really get it hooked up.
He never hooked it up?
No, not that day.
Yeah. But he was close. What did he teach you about living with cancer?
Steve focused more on his kids, I think, than anything, and made me fight more to survive. And so that focus on family, was something that he taught me.
You care deeply that you watch your daughter.
Yes.
As she continues to grow. And
it's about her. What was her life going to be like if I died? That's really motivating.
It was around that time that Kelly decided to commit himself to something even bigger. And why he approached Stanford University and a wealthy client named Hasso Plattner with the idea of setting up a school dedicated to human-centered design.
He thought that was a great idea, and he said he'd help me. And I said, thank you. And then I went back, and
you had no idea what he meant?
No. The development officer at Stanford says, when a billionaire says, I'll help you, you should call him back right away. So it turns out Hasso funded the whole thing. He said,
$35 million.
Yeah. He said, how much you need? I wish I'd have said $80 million. He said yes to whatever I said, I think.
Kelly now runs a groundbreaking and wildly popular Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford, the D School.
Okay.
It is recognized as the first program of its kind dedicated to teaching design thinking as a tool for innovation, not just to designers, but to students from all different disciplines.
I think you can follow your noses a little bit around that, like where's the big idea, where's the excitement?
Twice as many Stanford grad students want to take classes as are seats available. The lucky 500 students in the program augment their master's degree studies in business, law, medicine, engineering, and the arts by solving problems collaboratively and creatively and immersing themselves in the methodology he's made famous. But there are no degrees. It is something Steve Jobs talked him out of.
He said, I don't want somebody with one of your flaky degrees. Basically, right?
I don't want them working for me.
Yeah, I don't want them working for me. If they just have your flaky degree. But if they have a computer science degree or a business degree, and then they've come and have our way of thinking on top of that, I'm really excited about it.
Today, his cancer is in remission. He spends more time doing the things that he cares about most, including tinkering in his workshop with his 15-year-old daughter.
So, Claire, tell me this. What happens here?
Everything. Really everything.
Yeah, so Claire and I come here to do projects together. Our big project is right over there presently, which is to make a 3D printer. It's called a PrinterBot. And it's a little machine that makes 3D objects. Like a printer that puts ink on a page, this makes something three-dimensional.
His love of making things is as much a part of his DNA as his appreciation for the car, which he calls the most important object in our lives.
So why do you like it? What does it mean to you?
Well, you know, it's about the same vintage as me, and it just makes everybody smile. Okay,
I like the sound of the motor.
Almost every day you can find David Kelly driving his '54 Chevy pickup truck between Stanford and IDEO, inspiring the design thinkers of tomorrow and quietly shaping the future.
My theory is that sometimes life squeezes out the best of us.
I've never heard that, but that really resonates with me.
So if I could write the first line of your epitaph, it might be, David Kelly, help people find the confidence in their creativity.
That'd be lovely.
And change the world.
Yeah.
Go to 60minutesovertime.com for a guided tour with Charlie Rose, sponsored by Pfizer.
We had to make it so cheap, but it was hard to make it cheap and have it accurate. And we were so spent so much time trying to make it precise, meaning if I moved the mouse on the table 1 inch, that the cursor on the screen moved exactly 1 inch. We spent a lot of time doing that. And then as we started to test it, we realized it doesn't matter, right? Your brain's in the loop, right? So your brain's going to move it from here to where you want it, and it's going to stop. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's an inch. It only matters that since your brain is, if you draw the circuit diagram of the mouse and the computer and the human, there's a processor called your brain in the loop, and then so like we can make the thing much cheaper because we weren't. It wasn't about accuracy. It was just about the perceived place where the cursor was, and that the person would adjust that to be without thinking about it to be exactly right. So there are 100 things like that. You know, the ball made noise on the table. There was this. In those days, I explained to my students when I give the mouse tray. In those days, there was these things called pencils, and they had this pink thing on the top. And so what would happen in the original mice was they'd pick up the eraser gunk off the table and jam it up into the optics. All the original mice the solution was that the ball was removable so you could blow out the junk in it. It wasn't an elegant solution, but that's what it was that's the reason the ball's removable, because it would pick stuff off the desk. So anyways, there's lots of stories about the mouse, but that's the kind of how we got going on it.
Hello, is this working? Yes. I decided to not show any slides. Can you imagine that? A designer who's not going to show any slides? At the D School, we have a no PowerPoint rule, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, I also wanted to spend as much time taking your questions as possible. I've heard this stuff before that I'm about to say, but I haven't heard what you're interested in, so hopefully I'll talk for a very short time, and then we'll open it up to you for questions. But I wouldn't want to miss this. You know, it's such a great time for design, for designers, creative people. You know, most of my career, I felt like I was at the kids' table. You know, that the CEOs and those guys were in the real meeting. You know, the thing that was really going on, or the university faculty was in the real meeting, and I was the design person. And every once in a while, somebody'd walk over to the kids' table and say, "Where can I get shoes like that?" That was my role for the higher-ups, was, where do you get those glasses? That's not the case today. I mean, we are center stage and working on the most important and most strategic problems in the world, and at the university. I mean, I actually had the university president come up to me and say, "You can have all the money you want, just make all Stanford students confident in their creative ability." I mean, that's different than where'd you get those shoes, you gotta admit, right? As far as my importance the importance of design and that thing. So I've never really, in my life, I'm not a competitive person at all in anything. I've never really thought it was my role to promote IDEO. There's plenty of people in the audience. Fred's dust right there, that's his job to promote IDEO. But so my whole career I've talked about design and its importance and how I thought it was underserved. I mean, I really think of my job as making design more important in the world, and that's what I go around doing. So at first, how I got into this was I was an engineer, but I was in love with industrial design. I just didn't have the talent or the training or whatever you want to say. And so I started a company that would help industrial design companies, keep the exciting part of their products all the way through to manufacture. And what normally happens if you were an industrial designer in those days was you'd come up with this beautiful, magical thing, and I do think design is magical. Out of nowhere comes this picture of the future that nobody else could have come up with. And so I try to keep the exciting bits of that. My company would try to keep the exciting bits of that as it was, instead of having it compromised away, which is what normally happened. It was like, it's much easier if we don't make that square, if we painted a color we already have, it was that kind of mentality. And so we as engineers tried to make that happen. But we were super design sensitive, and I remember that the turning point for me to move from thinking of myself as an engineer to thinking of myself as some kind of designer, not the same kind as Dieter Rams, but I was the head of one of the most important industrial design firms in the world actually said to me, you know, we do the design, what do you do? And that broke my heart when he said, we do the design, what do you do? Because I do design, you know, but it was just a different kind of design, right? A different definition of design. And so from that point forward, I started trying to change what design was to make it more inclusive of more and more people, right? First thing happened that I merged with some industrial design firms and with my good friend Bill Moggridge. I miss him every day. And so we've built this firm that was more holistic, that was doing strategy work, that was doing experiences and services in addition to doing product design, which is what we called ourselves at first. So we'd moved to that. And so design became bigger and more inclusive. Bill Moggridge had this lovely notion. One day he came into my office and said, you know, I think this design of this digital stuff is way too important to leave it to the software engineers. We have to take this over. And he called what he wanted to do soft face. I'm still not sure what that has to do with anything. It quickly became interaction design, but Bill always had funny names for things. And so once he started that, and we started focusing on that, and then came anthropologists, and pretty soon design meant making impact in the world, right? Not designing a new podium or table, right? And so that felt really good because I really think that design has something to say. You know, it has some routinely come up with ideas that are new to the world, and that is really important. So what happened then was, so we're over here having a good time, you know, cute, you know, like, and I'd go to do something and they'd say, you're cute, but like, let's talk to the CEOs, you know. And then it's gradually moved away from that. One of the big impacts was this IBM study that was 1,500 CEOs, and they asked them, what's the most important thing in your company? This is worldwide, 1,500 CEOs. And they said, the most important thing in the company is to be more creative, to routinely innovate, right? To come up with things, instead of just selling a revised version of what we had last year, coming up with breakthrough ideas. Doesn't that sound like us? So that switch has made us have to become more mindful of our process. And so we started talking about design as design thinking, not taking away at all from design, just saying that the frame, the mindset that we use to talk about these things, to come up with new ideas, is design thinking. And I've been saying that for years. I would say, like, my students at Stanford are not particularly world class at the artistic part, and they're not particularly world class at the technical part. They're more generalists in the sense of how do you come up with ideas. And so I used to say, when they would complain that, you know, my portfolio doesn't look like it came from Art Center, and I can't do fourth order differential equations in my head like my other engineering friends, like, you know, what am I? And I said, no, you're an expert at design process. And somehow it just didn't go anywhere. I don't know. And we're doing the same thing exactly. And we started saying, no, it's design thinking. It's a way of thinking. It's a mindset. And for some reason that took off. And so from then on, we started taking on projects where the fact that we could codify it, the fact that we could talk about what we were going to do, and that the people, our clients, were realizing that we were going to come up with something that they couldn't come up with, right? That was it always surprised me when an idea would win a big job over some more, you know, obviously business savvy company, and we'd win the job, not all the time, but when I went to see the CEO and I'd say, why'd you pick us? And he said, well, you know, if I hired this other firm, I kind of know what they would come up with. I went to Harvard Business School. They went to Harvard Business School. I kind of know what they would come up with. I got no freaking clue what you guys are going to come up with. And that's where we wanted them to be, right? Because we want to paint a picture of the future with our new ideas in it. And then, so now we have this mindset. We have this process. We have the big win of design thinking is literally that it was a human-centered process that people would sign up to work together on. At Stanford, we must have started for 20 years talked about multidisciplinary teams working together. We talked about it. We would go to these meetings, we'd fight a bit, and we'd leave and say, I'm never going back to that meeting again, you know? And so what happened was that design thinking as a human-centered process is so acceptable to different kinds of people that the end result was we could get a doctor and an opera singer and a philosopher and a business person to actually adopt it as their process, and then they could build on each other's ideas. And if you can get that diversity of thinkers and you can get them to work together and build on each other's ideas, you're definitely going to come up with new to the world stuff, right? And so that was the big win of design thinking, that it was human-centered enough that basically everybody would sign up to use it, because it's building empathy for people and trying to understand what's meaningful to people. And everybody signs up to that. You know, if you want to soften up one of these tough people, start talking about their children. That's what's meaningful to them, right? And so we're able to do that. So anyway, what happened from there was, well, it just exploded into the kind of projects that we were hired to do, that we could hired at IDEO, or that we were allowed to do at the D School. Big, change the world kind of stuff. My favorite project that IDEO's done recently that exemplifies how you actually use this process the best that I know of is we looked at improving the lunch experience at San Francisco Unified School District. 53,000 lunches are served a day there. And so, as usual, we go in and with guns blazing, but what we're really doing is looking at what's meaningful to these kids, and it's pretty clear that the kids have not been in the design equation before, right? And the process of them, you don't just go in and ask the kids what they want. In fact, we do that, of course, and the kids say, if you just start serving ice cream from the minute we get in the room till we leave, that'd be a perfect lunch. But you don't. When you get in and you start watching them and understanding, you start to see that lunch is not about food. We were thinking we'd go in there and it'd be like Big Better Food. Turns out the food's actually quite good. It's done by a company called Revolution Foods, which makes really fantastic food for schools. So it wasn't about the quality of the food at all. But what you find out really quickly is, when you use this kind of understanding of the students, is that it's about socialization at lunch. I mean, I've been fooling around going to these classes all day, and I haven't been with my friends, and I get to lunch and I really want to have a good time. I really want to be with my friends. And so, but the way we got it set up now, you come in, you stand in a line, you may waste most of the time that you're there just kind of standing in line waiting to get your food. And there's, the person in the back kind of putting the food out. And so, to make a long story short, once you decided to design in this holistic way, and that you will design the experience that is meaningful to students, you say, okay, let's make it a great socialization experience. So what we do now basically is there's big tables, and you come in, you sit with your friends right away, you get going and whatever you got to catch up in what you need to talk about and hang out. And the food, using the students, involving the students and the people who used to be behind the wall giving the food, serve the food family style. And here's the big win. So all these schools, these public schools, have this kind of federally mandated thing where if you get enough fruits and vegetables on their plates, that they then they're paid for, right? The subsidy's paid for. But it turns out that they don't measure whether they eat them or not. So here's the big win of the new plan, which is that they come in, they sit with their friends, they're hungry, we serve the fruits and vegetables first. They eat them. What a deal. Somehow, so I'll go off, and I'll try not to, but I sometimes go off on things called bird walks, into different places, and so I'm going to avoid that, but I wanted to right there. Anyway, so then once you do it, you can just come, if you kind of look at the journey that the kid goes through at lunch, you can pick all those little points in the journey and make each one of them extraordinary. So you look at how they pay for lunch, and they pay for lunch, and there's a stigma associated with whether you're on the food subsidy or whether you're paying. So you go to a system that just has a card, and you swipe the card. Nobody knows whether you're paying or whether you're not paying. My Stanford office looks like this, my studio like this, my living room looks like this, everything looks like this. Cubbies, I say, just full of stuff.
This kind of clutter of memories is emotional. Hello, I'm David Kelly. I used to be important around here. Here's the very first prototype of the mouse that we made. It's falling apart. The first ball was out of a roll-on deodorant bottle, and the first cover was a yellow butter dish cover. This was the breakthrough from a kind of an engineering point of view. A very complex part that was injection molded, and then all the other parts just clipped in.